30 seconds. 20 seconds. 10 seconds.
Hi,
My name's J.C. McCauley.
I'm Naisha McCauley, and
Well,
you're
you're
watching
watching
AccessTV.org.
Good morning again. This is Jonathan Small, host and producer of Face to Face. And Face to Face is one of two different programs that I have the pleasure of hosting and producing live every single week at AccessTV.org studios. Face to Face is a show that's designed to ask the guests the hard questions and give you, the viewers, the answers and information that you deserve to know. This morning on Face to Face, we have a returning guest to the AccessTV.org network. We've had the pleasure of having him on the in-studio format of All About You and Face to Face to also go along with the virtual Morning Talk Live with J. Stan McCauley talk show. This guest this morning has a very former high-ranking appointed position for the United States government. He has many different capacities of political, governmental, economic expertise, and it's our pleasure to have the former U.S. Comptroller General of the United States, no other than David Walker. Good morning, David. How are you doing?
Good to be with you, Jonathan. I'm in a lot better shape than the country right now.
Definitely. Well, Dave, if you want to give a little bit about your background briefly before we get into our show, or if you want to jump right into our topics, it's up to you.
I'll give a little background. I am a CPA by training. I was a partner in the largest accounting consulting firm in the world, Arthur Andersen, before they had their problems. I've run 3 federal agencies, 2 in the executive branch, the Pension Benefit Guaranty Corporation and the Employee Benefit Security Administration, 1 in the legislative branch where I was Comptroller General of the United States, which in English is Auditor General, Chief Accountability Officer, and head of the Government Accountability Office. I've been a trustee of Social Security and Medicare. I've been chairman of the Audit Committee of the United Nations. I've been a CEO of 2 not-for-profits. I'm on the Defense Business Board, was a professor at the Naval Academy. So I've had a pretty varied background. I've had the pleasure of leading organizations in the public, private, not-for-profit sector. I've published 4 books. The latest one is America in 2040, still a superpower, question mark. And you can find out more about it at americain2040.com. So I keep pretty busy, even though I'm theoretically supposed to be retired, but not in reality.
Well, it's our pleasure to have you actively involved and willing to participate on media coverages like this, and that's definitely a very impressive resume and background. But as you mentioned, the state of the country with this current political climate going on since the last presidential debate, there's been a lot of speculations that President Joe Biden should step down and be removed from office. First of all, should President Joe Biden step down, or should he finish out his term as presidencies, or should there be some other alternative in your opinion?
Well, I did watch the debate, and I've watched several interactions with the president, including his interview by George Stephanopoulos after the debate. Here's my opinion. The president clearly has declined from the standpoint of his mental acuity. He's clearly declined from the standpoint of his stamina and energy level. I'm somewhat concerned about today, but I'm very concerned about how's he going to progress over time? Because once starts people start losing their mental acuity, which is not unusual at his age, once they start losing their energy and stamina, which is not unusual at his age, it's only going to go one way, and that's downhill. And the President of the United States is the chief executive officer of the federal government, the commander in chief, and the leader of the free world. And so, therefore, with all of that in mind, in my opinion, Biden should finish out his term. I don't think he should be removed due to the 25th Amendment. Candidly, I think he's been like this for a while and it's been covered up, and they've been able to manage with it. And at the same point in time, I think he should announce that he's not going to seek reelection, and the Democrats should end up having an open process so that people can compete for that, including Vice President Harris, but not automatically go with Vice President Harris, because quite frankly, in many polls, she's less popular than President Biden. So, in summary, he should not seek reelection. But the only way that's going to happen is if he voluntarily decides not to seek reelection, because he already has enough delegates to be the nominee. So if he doesn't step aside, he will be the nominee. But I think he should be allowed to fill out his term unless something happens where he deteriorates significantly within the next few months.
Well, Dave, two issues that you mentioned. You did mention the word cover up, and that's a strong allegation to make towards the United States government. As a former U.S. Comptroller General of the United States, you clearly have insight information on what's going on from the past. I don't know about today, that many of your everyday citizens don't have. The second thing you mentioned also, that he should finish out his term, but there's a tremendous division within the Democratic Party right now that really some people feels he should step down and not decide to run for president. Some Democrats, I believe the Black Caucus, the Hispanic Caucus, they are behind President Joe Biden. So there's kind of a division. But when you say the word cover up, you have any kind of evidence, or is something that you can kind of share to people how you could actually cover up something of the president's medical condition, that he is not fit, or everything from medical tests that's being reported is not accurate? That's a real strong allegation, Dave. That's one of
I don't know that I use the word cover up, Jonathan, but let me tell you what I believe. It's obvious that the president has not had as much direct interaction with the public and with the press as most presidents have in the past. Has not done nearly as many public events. He's not done nearly as many press conferences. He's relied upon others to communicate for him. Secondly, he doesn't. He releases what he wants to release with regard to his physicals. He's refused to take a basic cognitive test and to release the results of that. That's pretty standard for somebody of his age. It's covered by Medicare. He's clearly, covered by Medicare, although he's got other insurance as president of the United States. And so I think, the bottom line is that we don't know as much as people think they need to know in order to be able to make an informed judgment. But are you going to believe your eyes, your ears, and your brain? To the extent that you do have it, have an opportunity to see the president. The interview was pretty clear that he was much better than he was in the debate, but clearly is not what he was 4 years ago, and he's not going to be 4 years from now what he is today. And frankly, the challenges that we face both domestically and internationally are increasing, not decreasing.
Well, Dave, the performance of the president over the last three and a half years, there's a lot of mixed reviews towards how the country has been functioning. I mean, some people will say inflation is at an all-time high. I know you have a lot of tremendous economic expertise. the housing situation of the United States, the international affairs of conflicts that's going on overseas. There has been a lot of different changes. Would you say over the past 3 to 3.5 years since President Biden has been elected president, with the exception of, well, I think COVID was actually started it under President Trump's
It did.
administration.
It
Okay,
did.
it
It
did.
did. Yeah.
Um, what's the
Well,
status of the country, though, in your opinion?
let's talk about some of the facts
Hmm.
and try to provide a little bit of contextual sophistication. With regard to economic growth, uh, the country has had positive economic growth during Biden, except for 2 quarters. We had negative economic growth in 2 quarters. The latest data for economic growth is 1.4%, a real growth of GDP, gross domestic product. That's very slow growth, but it is growth. We'll get new numbers for the second quarter later this month. With regard to inflation, inflation was 1.4% when Biden took office. It rose to 9.1% in June of 2022. It's now down to about 3.3, 3.4%, which is obviously down significantly from June of 2022, but up significantly from January of 2021, and still above the Fed's target rate of 2%. If you look at unemployment, unemployment is low, but it's risen the last 2 months. It's 4.1% is the latest number. Unemployment before COVID was about 3.5%. COVID obviously had a serious adverse impact, but we've recovered those jobs and more since then. If you look at real wages, so how much have wages gone up as compared to inflation? Real wages went down in 2021 and 2022. They went up a little bit in 2023, but over time they're down 3 to 4% as compared to the beginning of the administration. So the economic record is mixed. Okay.
Hmm.
If you look at, but if you look at under the hood, if you look at things like food prices, energy prices, insurance prices, what the rates for a mortgage, those have gone up much more than 20%, which is the average inflation rate since January of 2021. And those are things that everybody experiences. Everybody is affected by that. And so while inflation is coming down, accumulated inflation over the last 3.5 years is what's really on the mind of Americans. And then you've got other issues. You've got the southern border, which is number two issue on on the mind of the voters. The southern border is totally out of control,
Hmm.
and the president didn't do anything about it until about a month ago. And what he did was, frankly, totally ineffective. And so that has economic, domestic tranquility, and other consequences. And then if you look at internationally, we've got a conflict in Europe now with Ukraine. We've got a conflict in the Middle East, and there's more instability in the world. And we now have an alliance against U.S. interests led by China, Russia, Iran, and North Korea. By the way, all those are noted in my book, which was originally published in 2020 and updated earlier this year. I predicted the rise of the alliance against the United States economically, diplomatically, militarily, and culturally. It's happening, and it's increasing in significance. So it's important to not just talk about where we've been, but where we're headed, because elections are really about the future. They're not about the past. And in fairness to President Biden, he has had some major legislative victories. But some of those legislative victories also resulted in excess inflation because the federal government spent so much money, whether it be on green initiatives or other infrastructure or additional subsidies for COVID. Some of those things, were the cause of excess inflation, and the desire to follow the so-called modern monetary theory that says you don't need to worry about deficits and debt. That is one of the reasons that we had the excess inflation. And fortunately, hopefully that's been cast in the dustbin of history. That's a long answer, a lot of information, but hopefully helpful.
Very helpful, very clarifications, and very relevant, I believe, to what's going on within the country as we currently speak. There's been a lot of media coverage over this past weekend about the debate about President Joe Biden, about former President Donald Trump. One issue that was brought up was this so-called, if I'm saying it correctly, Project 2025, some type of think tank organization that's trying to affiliate this particular platform or agenda with former President Donald Trump. Now, it's been reported that there's no direct connection between former President Trump and Project 2025. Do you know anything about this particular project plan that they was talking about over the weekend through the media?
Well, Jonathan, my understanding is that Project 2025 is an initiative of the Heritage Foundation, which is a conservative think tank in Washington, D.C. My understanding is that it's what they would like to see President Trump do, but that there's no direct connection between Project 2025 and Trump or the Trump campaign. It's basically a conservative agenda, in the opinion of the people who put it together, most of whom, if not all, are affiliated with the Heritage Foundation. I am not involved with Project 2025, for the record.
Well, is it kind of likely or unlikely if Donald Trump gets re-elected or gets elected as president that some of these issues and initiatives of Project 25 will be implemented under his presidential policies?
Well, I would imagine that his cabinet will consider information from a variety of sources, including whatever is in this particular document. But they'll make independent judgments about what they think makes sense to pursue and not to pursue. And, as you know, President Trump is a pretty strong personality. He makes the ultimate decisions on what his policies and priorities are going to be. He'll have input both internally within his administration and externally from a variety of parties. But in the end, he'll make the judgment. I think people have gotten too hyped up on this, and people are trying to create distractions from other issues right now, and this is just one of those.
David, who do you think is going to be the front runner to be selected as the vice president running mate of Donald Trump, in your opinion? Do you see any front runner currently out there? And do you have any type of estimation of when he will make this selection?
I expect he'll make it the first day of the Republican convention next week. He's trying to hold on to speculation, if you will. There are a number of top people that are being considered. Governor Burgum from North Dakota, Senator Rubio, Senator other senators, from South Carolina. Tim Scott, for example, is being considered. The senator from Ohio is also being considered. So, he's got several other people also that have been in the mix. He'll pick somebody solid, and I would imagine that a number of the people that are being speculated about who don't end up being selected are likely to play a role within his administration if he's elected, potentially in the cabinet.
David, is it too early to determine, is it either President Biden's election to lose? Is it former President Donald Trump's election to lose? Or is this just a close call as we currently speak, and it could come down to every particular voter?
Well, let's talk about independent polling. a year ago, or pardon me, 4 years ago, at the same point in time, when we had a presidential election for 2020, Joe Biden was up about 10 points in the polls. He's now down. He's down anywhere from 2 to 6 points, depending upon which poll you want to go by. If, for a Democrat to win the Electoral College, they generally need to win the popular vote by at least 4%. And he's down right now. And he was up 10 points, 4 years ago. But as you know, getting elected president is not about the popular vote. It's about the Electoral College. And there are 6 or 7 states that are going to be key to the election. It's going to be close, and it's going to be decided by 6 or 7 states. Those states, off the top of my head, are Nevada, Arizona, Georgia, North Carolina, Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin. uh, those are the primary ones. There are other states that allegedly may now be in play, that weren't in play before. States like Virginia, where I live, New Hampshire, Minnesota, uh, and a few others. If those states are in play, then the odds are favor Trump versus Biden. I think the reason you have the concern in the Democratic Party right now is they want to beat Trump. In fact, I would say more than anything else, it's about beating Trump than it is anything else. And the question is can the president do that? Especially given increasing concerns about his mental acuity and stamina, which, as I said before, are only going to get worse with the passage of time.
But David, isn't this almost the same scenario that took place in the 2020 presidential election? It really wasn't about President Joe Biden. It was just about any particular candidate that could defeat uh, Donald Trump, meaning that the Democratic Party and the Democratic elected base was just so heavily motivated by removing Donald Trump that they probably did not look fully into who would become president. And that's not a good scenario to run your particular political party, just to have one person not be elected and not try to have the best candidate become elected and be president in the United States. Now, are you saying this is going to be really the same scenario going into 2024? That even if Joe Biden is not well enough mentally, physically to become president, that any particular candidate that the Democratic can find without thoroughly looking into seeing if this is the best candidate to run the country over the next 4 years, more than just the motivation that they just want to have a particular candidate to remove or defeat Donald Trump. If I'm saying it clear enough that you understand what I'm saying? Okay, just want to make sure.
Several things. Let's go back to 2020. I believe that Donald Trump beat Hillary Clinton largely because of the anti-Clinton vote. Go back to, I'm sorry, 2016.
16, yes. Okay.
2016. Let's go to 2020. I believe that Joe Biden beat Donald Trump largely because of the anti-Trump vote. Okay. Now we've got a situation where we've got a rematch between Biden and Trump. I believe that the Democrats care more about beating Trump than they do about being for Biden. Trump has a solid base that's not going anywhere. Okay. Biden has a solid base of anti-Trump people that aren't going anywhere. But there's a lot more enthusiasm on the Trump side than there is the Biden side. But now the Democrats are getting concerned because they haven't had an open primary. They're now facing a situation where Biden may not be able to beat Trump. And so they're trying to figure out what they can do to increase the likelihood that they will be able to beat Trump. But as I come back and I said before, if Biden doesn't withdraw, he's the nominee.
Mm.
If he does withdraw, they don't have very much time to be able to have a credible process to pick the right candidate. But I do believe that their primary focus is on beating Trump rather than, a specific policy agenda for the future for America. And I think it's unfortunate that the last several elections have been about personalities rather than policies. And in many cases, they've been about the past rather than the future. That's the exact opposite of what we need in order to create a better future for America and Americans.
Well, can the Democratic Party run on the record of President Joe Biden's over the last 3.5 years and saying that the country is moving in the right direction? Because usually that's what a particular party will try to advocate and promote. Like, look at what has happened under the current presidential administration over the past 3 to 4 years. Is the record strong enough in some areas that they could sell that to the voters?
Well, look, the president has had some accomplishments, but he's also had some very negative experiences as well with regard to excess inflation, with regard to the border, with regard to international conflicts. Uh, Typically Americans kind of keep it simple. Are you better off today than you were 4 years ago? Uh, and, that's a fairly simple question. And based upon polling that has been done recently, the answer for most Americans is no.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not better off today than I was 4 years ago. Obviously, there are exceptions to that. And now you've got, the additional concerns about the, mental acuity of the president and the physical stamina of the president. Uh, and that's not going to affect the base. That's not going to affect hardcore Democrats or hardcore Biden supporters, but it is going to affect independents and undecided voters. And for the record, I'm an independent. And now, when you look at voter registration, over 45% of voters are unaffiliated, independent, and they tend to make judgments not based upon which party it is, but they tend to make judgments based upon the person and their policies and proposals uh, and uh, and those are the deciders in races.
Well, is there any disadvantages of being an independent voter like yourself or independent party? I mean, you don't have the full backing of a strong party, or you think that really doesn't make a difference in today's political climate?
Well, it does make a difference. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, in some states, you're if they have closed party primaries, meaning you've got to be a member of a party in order to vote in the primary, you don't get to vote until the general election.
Mm-hmm.
And that's one of the reasons that we have, polarization in Washington is because, you have in those states, you know, since a vast majority of congressional seats are safe seats, and there are not that many that are truly contested, it means that whoever's going to represent that district is decided in the primary. And there's very low turnout, and the party activists tend to turn out much more than the non-activists. And so you end up getting people that are further to the right than the public and further to the left than the public, which creates not only a partisan challenge, but an ideological divide, which is, I think, a bigger challenge than the partisanship. For independents, everybody talks about you want bipartisan solutions, meaning Democrats and Republicans. But, guess what? I mean, Democrats and Republicans only have, in the 20s percentiles of registered voters, whereas independents are over 40. I mean, we really ought to be having commissions and other initiatives that involve Democrats, Republicans, and independents, because independents are a much bigger share of the population. In my state, I'm fortunate. I live in Virginia, and I have the opportunity to vote in either one of the primaries. I can't vote in both, but I get to decide whether I want to vote in the Republican primary or the Democratic primary. And I've voted in both in the past, depending upon the nature of the election and in which one I think is more competitive, and it's more important for me to be able to express my view. But as I said, in a lot of states, you have to be a member of a party in order to be able to vote in the primary. I'm against that. I think we ought to have integrated and open primaries, or at least semi-open primaries. And I think that would end up giving us, candidates, frankly, that are more in the sensible center. By that, I mean center right, center left, more willing to work together to try to get things done and to break this partisan and ideological gridlock that we have in Washington right now.
Well, David, does the United States really need a strong third party? Because you hear all of these smaller forms of a third party, like the Green Party, and then you mentioned that there's a high number of independent voters, registered voters that consist out in our country. And I think sometimes people have the feeling or just the reality that you're either left with the options of being a Democrat or a Republican. That's where the strong money and the financial backings, the influence come from. People will say the Democrats got a heavily financial stake in the unions. People would say the Republicans have a very heavily in stake in corporate America and big businesses. So is there any need for a strong third party that can be almost equivalent as the two Democratic and Republican parties?
I think there's room for a strong centrist third party.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, the two major parties don't want that. They don't want more competition. Um, they would like to keep it real simple for people. You're either for us or you're against us. They would like to give you just two choices. This country was based in part on choice and competition. I'm one of the national co-founders of No Labels. We were planning to provide a third option for president and vice president, a so-called unity ticket, meaning they couldn't have the same political affiliations, that would be committed to an issue-oriented and results-based agenda for the future for America. In the end, we didn't run that ticket. Uh, I think that was a mistake. I think we should have run a ticket, but that's water over the dam. So now we're trying to figure out what's the best way forward. Some within the movement would like to form a third party. Others would not. But one of the things that we're continuing to do is to try to recruit and support candidates for Congress who are willing to work on a bipartisan basis to try to solve problems. We were the driving force behind the creation of the so-called Problem Solvers Caucus, which is roughly 60 members of the House of Representatives, equally divided between Democrat and Republican, who work together to try to get things done. And they were instrumental in the infrastructure bill and the CHIPS Act, in avoiding a government shutdown. And so, when the margins are as close as they are between the two parties, if you can get a small group of people who are willing to work together for the benefit of the country, and that believe that country is more important than party, you can make a difference. And they have made a difference, and I think there's an opportunity for them to grow and potentially make an even bigger difference in the future.
David, the economic direction that the country is going towards, I think you have some type of blueprint. You mentioned about 2040. Let's just say many different factors of what it will require to become a homeowner, what it will require to be able to be financially secure or be much financially stronger, student debt, credit card debt. I mean, these are some major problems that the country currently is going through. And is there a way from your blueprint and other factors that the country needs to be corrected in some structural areas to make our country much stronger than it currently exists that you can explain a little bit about?
Yeah. The title of my latest book is America in 2040, Still a Superpower, question mark, a pathway to success. And the bottom line is, the answer is, if you follow the guidance in the book, the answer to the question can be yes. And if you don't follow the guidance of the book and continue to do what we're doing, which is uh, putting our future at risk, then the answer will be no. First, what are the four things it takes to be a superpower? You need to have global economic power, global diplomatic influence, global military capabilities, and global cultural influence. The United States has that. We're the only country that had that after World War II. Russia was never a global economic power. They never had global cultural influence. But we now face a rising China who's a pure competitor, who, if they don't meet all those criteria today, and I think they do meet 3 out of the 4, they will meet them in the not too distant future. They have now formed an alliance against U.S. interest in all 4 of those dimensions, as I mentioned before, involving Russia, Iran, North Korea, and others. Uh, if you look at our finances, the government's finances, we've lost control of our finances. We have, $2 trillion deficits, 35 trillion in debt, 125 trillion in liabilities and unfunded promises. All of those are growing faster than the economy. Our fastest growing expense is interest. We're spending more on interest than we are national defense. Our savings rate is too low. Our debt is too high. That's the exact opposite of what you need to create a better future. And so what this book does is it states the facts, it speaks the truth, and it provides a way forward for us to be able to put our finances in order and address a number of the other challenges that we face, both domestically and internationally, in order to make sure that our future is better than our past. I hate to say it, but my generation, the baby boom generation, is not discharging its stewardship responsibilities. Things are not better positioned for the future right now. That can be corrected. It needs to be corrected. And it starts at the top with the president. And we need a president who's committed to making tough choices. And there are a lot of ideas in this book that have been supported by super majorities of the American public. Super majorities, because the people are way ahead of the politicians. They know we've got problems. They want them solved. They're willing to accept tough choices if they're part of a comprehensive goal-based plan consistent with principles and values that bring people together rather than divide them apart.
As we were kind of wrapping down on our show, I heard some media hosts this morning mention that if you elect or if Joe Biden gets re-elected president, there's a strong chance that the United States could move into a socialist structure or a socialist country. Is America too strong of a capitalistic country to ever have any indications that we could become a socialist country?
Well, it all depends upon how you define socialist. One of the things I talk about in the book is I think the greatest challenge we face is not, from a political standpoint, is not a partisan divide. It's an ideological divide. It's the divide between those who believe in the principles and values under which our country was founded and that made us great, and those that believe in socialist state principles like the ones advocated by Saul Alinsky. And let me give you a little color commentary on that. And this country was founded on such principles as limited but effective federal government, individual liberty and opportunity, personal responsibility and accountability, rule of law and equal justice under the law, fiscal responsibility, intergenerational equity, and stewardship. Those are founding principles with the understanding that this country will never be perfect. And that's why we say, as part of our founding documents, that we will strive to form a more perfect union. And that's why we've had 27 constitutional amendments over the years, and we need more. And I'm fighting for more right now in connection with constitutional amendments. But socialist state principles include things like low government, increased dependency on government, take control of education, take control of healthcare, don't worry about deficits and debt. And the truth is during 2021 and 2022, those were the principles that prevailed, along with the so-called modern monetary theory, which is a macroeconomic theory that says, don't worry about deficits and debt as long as you can borrow in your own reserve currency until you have excess inflation. Well, guess what? We got excess inflation because people followed the modern monetary theory, which was flawed, failed, and should be cast in the dustbin of history. So, I do believe that one of the real challenges we face is which path do we want to go on? And candidly, I believe that a deal was cut for Biden to be the president, that as long as he followed the progressive agenda, that he could be president. uh, and he followed it, uh, clearly in the first 2 years of his presidency. It was put somewhat in check when the Republicans took control of the House. But this election is going to be very significant, not just with regard to who's going to be our next president, both of whom have been before, but which path are we going to go on? Which direction are we going to go in order to try to help make sure that our future will be better than our past?
Well, David, let's say that's going to have to be your last words. And I always try to leave the show on somewhat of a positive, upbeat ending. And I think somewhat that's an honest assessment that you just outlined, which I think is real important for people, particularly the voters, to know heading into the upcoming November presidential election. As I always like to ask my guests towards the end of the show, if there's any last words or commentaries or any information that you would like for people to know, feel free to do so.
Look, we live in the greatest country on earth, but we're not as great as we think we are.
Mm-hmm.
We face a number of challenges domestically and internationally that we need to come to grips with. We need to learn from history. We need to learn from others. We need to work together to break the gridlock in Washington. Uh, and if we do, our future will be better than our past. We can, we must, and I hope that we will make tough choices. I'm doing everything I can to make sure that we do. If you want to find out more about what are some of the things that we need to do, then go to americain2040.com. That's americain2040.com. We the people, the first three words in the Constitution are the most important. We the people are responsible and accountable for what does or does not happen. I'm going to do everything I can. I hope you will too. Thank you.
Okay, and thank you, David, for your former U.S. Comptroller General of the United States, to go along with many other titles, and it was definitely a pleasure and a real interesting, informative conversation to have with you this morning on Face to Face. And I wish you the very best of luck, whatever particular future plans that you are currently working on and moving towards. And it was our pleasure having you on AccessTV.org network.
Thank you, Jonathan. Appreciate it very much. All the best.
You're welcome, and you take care and have a good time. All right. Okay, this is Jonathan Small. I just enjoyed hosting this edition of Face to Face with the former United States Comptroller General. It was an excellent interview to have. He brought a lot of real good, solid, factual information. Whether you agree with him or not, he has his facts. David Walker clearly put together, and definitely was real informative to have him on this edition of Face to Face. Definitely working towards a great show next week, and I look forward to seeing you again if it's God's willing. And as I always say, for people out there, have a very blessed day and keep the faith. Thank you.